You wake up and the silence is deafening. The bed feels colder, the air heavier, the world quieter in a way that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels hollow, like something was ripped out of you. Not just their presence, not just their voice, but something deeper, something that was tied to your sense of self. You walk through your day like a ghost. You check your phone without knowing what you're hoping to see. Maybe a text, maybe a sign, maybe an apology wrapped in longing. But mostly you're searching for something that will make the ache make sense, because what they took wasn't just themselves. It was the version of you that only existed when they were around. And that's what Carl Jung would want you to understand. The emptiness you feel isn't just about them, it's about what they represented within you. Jung believed that when we connect with someone deeply, when our soul seems to fuse with theirs, what's actually happening is a collision of unconscious material, wounds, desires, archetypes, shadow. You aren't just loving them. You're loving the parts of yourself they reflect back to you. And so when they leave, it's not just the loss of a person, it's the shattering of a mirror. The image of who you were in their presence dissolves, the reflection vanishes, and you're left staring into an empty space where something sacred used to live. You feel like you lost your identity, your purpose, your sense of belonging, because you didn't just share time with them, you shared energy, you shared dreams, you shared the most fragile parts of yourself and let them be seen. And now those parts feel abandoned, not just by them, but by you. That's why it feels so hard to breathe, why the days blur and the nights drag, why food doesn't taste right, music sounds different, your favorite things feel dull, because the life you had built in your mind, the life with them in it, is gone. And in its place is a blank space, too quiet to ignore. But here's the truth. Jung would whisper to you in the middle of the night when the ache grows louder. You didn't lose yourself. You lost the illusion that someone else could complete you. Jung called it the process of projection. When we fall in love, especially intensely, we project onto the other person the parts of ourselves that are unloved, unseen, disowned. We look at them and don't just see them, we see our longing, our hope, our wholeness. They become the answer to a question we've been carrying since childhood. Am I lovable as I am? And when they leave, it feels like the answer is no. But that's the illusion. Because the answer to that question was never theirs to give. The reason you feel so empty is because you outsourced your worth. You handed your heart to someone and said, "Make me feel whole." You tied your identity to their attention. You measured your value by their affection. You made them the lighthouse in a sea you never learned to swim on your own. So when the lighthouse turned off, you didn't just feel lost, you felt invisible. And that's where the wound is. That's where the work begins. Carl Jung taught that in order to become whole, we must individuate. We must reclaim the pieces of ourselves we've scattered across people, places, and memories. And heartbreak, as brutal as it is a portal into that reclamation. The emptiness is not a punishment. It's an invitation. It's your psyche's way of saying, there's a part of you that you've abandoned. And now that they're gone, it's time to return to it. When you feel empty after they leave, it's tempting to think what you're feeling is simply the absence of their presence, their voice, their warmth, the way they occupied space in your life. But that's not the full story. What you're actually feeling is the disappearance of a distraction, one that ran so deep you didn't even know you were hiding behind it. Their presence didn't just comfort you, it absorbed your attention, it rerouted your focus, it gave your emotional pain a new destination. It was a kind of anesthetic, a soothing but temporary escape from the ache that lived inside you long before they arrived. Because when they were around, you didn't have to face your loneliness head on. You didn't have to sit in the silence and hear the echo of your own unmet needs. You didn't have to reckon with the emotional void that's been quietly stretching itself across your chest since childhood. Instead, you could distract yourself with their texts, with their moods, with the ever-shifting dance of closeness and distance. You could pour your energy into analyzing their behavior, wondering how to keep them interested, how to decode the meaning behind their silences, their compliments, their coldness. You could convince yourself that love was just a few steps away if only you said the right thing, fixed the right flaw, proved your worth just a little harder. And that constant effort, though exhausting, was familiar. It kept your hands full, it gave you purpose, it allowed you to avoid looking too closely at the parts of yourself you hadn't yet learned to sit with, the parts that still believed love had to be earned, the parts that were terrified of abandonment, of not being enough, of being alone with nothing but your own thoughts. But now they're gone. And in their absence, everything you once buried has risen to the surface. The quiet has become deafening, the stillness has become a mirror. And what you're really feeling isn't just the loss of them, it's the return of everything they kept at bay, the loneliness you silenced, the fear you postponed, the ache you disguised as passion. And yes, it hurts. It stings in places that feel ancient. But as Carl Jung would say, this pain is not the end, it's the beginning. Because when the distraction vanishes, you finally get to meet the self you've been avoiding. This is the truth Jung spoke of when he said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And anything can look like falling in love with someone who gives you just enough attention to keep your wounds from bleeding out, but never enough presence to help you truly heal. Anything can be building a relationship on projection, on illusion, on the fantasy that someone else can give you the love you never learned to give yourself. But at some point, the projection collapses, the fantasy dissolves, the relationship ends, and you're left with yourself. And that self can feel like a stranger, a person you've never really sat with, never fully known, because you were always too busy trying to be who someone else needed you to be. This is the moment of reckoning, the moment where you stop asking, why did they leave, and start asking, what were they distracting me from? And the answers, while painful, are also sacred, because they lead you inward. They pull you into the hollow space they left behind, and in that space, something remarkable begins to happen. You begin to ask the questions that actually matter, not the ones that chase after them, not the ones that try to make sense of their behavior, but the ones that turn the mirror back on you. You begin to wonder what part of yourself felt most seen in their presence, what emotional need they were fulfilling that you had been neglecting, what story about your own worth you were trying to rewrite through their love. And when those answers start to emerge, when the grief bubbles up, when the shame starts to speak, when the silence wraps itself around you like a cold wind, you resist the urge to run, you stay, you breathe, you hold space for the parts of yourself that have never had a safe place to land, the needy parts, the insecure parts, the angry, forgotten, exhausted parts. Because this, Jung would say, is the beginning of integration. This is what it means to become whole, not by adding someone else to your life, but by welcoming back the parts of yourself that you left behind in pursuit of someone else's love. There is a tendency in the face of this emptiness to want to fill it quickly, to go searching for someone new, to numb it with work, with distractions, with anything that keeps us from having to feel what we're feeling. But the emptiness is not a void to be feared. It's a space being cleared for something real. It's your psyche making room, because now that you're not trying to fit into someone else's story, you finally have the chance to write your own. Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams, Who looks inside awakes. This is your awakening. And yes, it's painful, it's raw. It asks everything of you, but it's also what frees you. Because the person you thought you needed was never the answer. They were the catalyst, the mirror, the representation of all the parts of yourself you still needed to retrieve. Their presence lit up your need for validation, your longing to be seen, but their absence, it lights up your path to integration, to becoming someone who no longer seeks completion through others, but instead offers completion to themselves. Because the real healing doesn't happen when they come back. It happens when you come back to yourself. When you return to the core of who you are, not as someone who was rejected, but as someone who is finally ready to be reclaimed, someone who no longer abandons themselves in pursuit of belonging, someone who no longer tries to earn what should be freely given, someone who understands that love in its truest form cannot be begged for or bargained with. It must be received from a place of inner wholeness, and that wholeness is not something they can give you. It's something only you can create. So let the emptiness be here. Don't resist it. Don't try to rush past it. Don't mask it with distractions or silence it with temporary comforts. Let it settle beside you like an old companion, because in many ways it is. This emptiness has been with you far longer than the person who just left. They didn't create it. They only illuminated what was already waiting for you underneath the surface of your everyday life. So let it sit, let it speak, even if its voice trembles, even if its words are hard to hear, because what it has to say is not meant to destroy you, it's meant to reveal you. This emptiness isn't a void, it's a doorway, a sacred threshold into the places within you that you've long abandoned. The parts of you that have been asking, not always in words, but in longing, to be noticed, to be known, to be loved. It's an invitation to meet yourself beyond the roles you've played, the masks you've worn, the identities you've clung to in hopes that someone else would make you feel whole. It's a mirror reflecting the places where you've outsourced your worth. And now that the distraction of their presence is gone, you finally have the space to turn inward and ask the questions that really matter. Who am I when I'm not performing for love? What do I believe about myself in the absence of validation? Can I still feel worthy when there's no one watching? Because the greatest journey you will ever take is not toward another person. It's not the pursuit of the one. It's not about finally finding someone who makes you feel chosen. It's the slow, courageous return to the self you've forgotten. The self that existed before you were told you had to earn love. The self that cried out when you were young and learned that emotional needs were too much, too inconvenient, too vulnerable to be held by someone else. The self that was buried under years of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and quiet resentment. The self that adapted to survive but never stopped aching to be truly seen. And as that self begins to emerge, timid at first, unsure of whether it's really safe, you'll notice something start to shift inside you. The emptiness that once felt like a black hole will soften. It won't necessarily go away right away, but it will begin to feel less suffocating. Not because someone else has stepped in to fill it, but because you are learning how to fill it yourself, with presence, with patience, with radical self-compassion. You'll begin to understand that emptiness is not always a sign of something being wrong. Sometimes it's the soil. The dark, fertile ground where something new can grow, something that belongs entirely to you. Space that was once cluttered with the noise of fear and longing is now open for something deeper: self-trust, self-respect, self-love. And that love is no longer performative. It's no longer dependent on someone else's ability to see you. It's quiet, steady, unconditional. A gentle commitment to stay with yourself no matter how unlovable you once believed you were. So yes, let the emptiness be here. Don't push it away. Don't label it as weakness, because this emptiness is not the absence of love. It's the space where real love is about to begin. Not love rooted in fantasy or projection or survival, but love that is grounded, embodied, earned, not through pain, but through presence. And that presence starts with you, the person who stayed, the person who's still here, the person who is finally learning how to come home